Hi, everyone. Welcome back to the Comics Lair for our discussion of magic in the comics and related media. The Comics Lair is sponsored by Heroes Aren't Hard to Find and Heroes Convention. I'm your moderator, Nancy Northcott. And we'll start with everyone introducing themselves and telling us a little bit about how they got into comics. John, will you start?
Okay, my name is John L. French. I'm a retired crime scene investigator, having done 35 plus years in on the streets of Baltimore. I'm now a more or less full-time writer and writing crime, pulp, magic, fantasy, and all that good stuff. I got into comics when I was just a wee lad and stopped somewhere around 8th grade, 9th grade, or something like that, only to get back into it with Batman the Dark Knight. And now I have way too many comics. But I particularly like, I like all kinds, but I do have an affinity for the magic ones.
Okay, Gini?
Hi, I'm Gini Koch. I write the Alien Catherine Kitty Cat series for Doll Books. I also write under a variety of pen names and in all lengths and genres. And I'm a huge comics geek girl, even though they weren't really allowed by my mother and grandmother when I was growing up. But I managed to sneak them anyway, and really got, once I was making my own money, I really was able to start really getting into them a little more in depth, as opposed to furtively reading them in the market till, we were ready to check out.
Okay, Robyn?
Hi, I'm Robyn. I am co-host of Diversity Issues podcast, where we talk about diversity in indie comics. I've always been into comic related things, like Batman the Animated Series, 97 X-Men, the 90s series X-Men, things like that. But we didn't have a comic shop in my neighborhood growing up, so I didn't get into reading comics and graphic novels until I was an adult and had my own disposable income that I could go and buy comics.
And Fraser.
Hi, I'm Fraser Sherman. I write film reference books and historical fantasy. And my first comic book was Justice League of America 30 in 1964. It included Dr. Fate and Green Lantern's evil parallel world counterpart Power Ring, whose ring is magic-based. So I'm quite used to having magic in comics.
As I said, I'm Nancy Northcott. I write historical fantasy for Falstaff Books. I also independently publish several different kinds of romance and co-write the Outcast Station science fiction series with Jeannie Adams. I got into comics when I was about 8 years old. My first comic, ironically, because I now can't stand Jimmy Olsen of the 60s and 70s, was an issue of Jimmy Olsen that also featured the Phantom Zone. It did not have any magic in it, but I like magic in the comics anyway. And so, at that point, if I say magic in the comics, and that means comics and related media as well, what's the first thing that comes to mind for you? Jenny?
I actually think of Doctor Strange right away. Just because, the Sorcerer Supreme, all the other stuff. And I even the whiny versions, and there have been some really whiny versions in his origin story. I like all of them. And I really love how they expand the magic everywhere. So for me, first up is Doctor Strange.
Robyn?
For me, I think because I read predominantly indie comics, it doesn't come with a specific character. It comes more with a genre. So when I think of magic, I think of fantasy comics. I think of horror comics. And that's another thing I'm hoping that we kind of get into, because when I was thinking about this panel, I was like, oh, does that count? Because there's some horror comics where there are literally magic users, and then there are some comics where there are like monsters, and it's like, oh, so does that count or not? So I'm hoping we kind of get to that.
Okay. Fraser?
What was the question? Oh, first off, I think of Doctor Strange. Steve Ditko, Stanley era Doctor Strange is one of my all-time favorite Marvel strips. Nobody's matched Ditko's weird art for making magic look magical, Also, the Steve Englehart, Frank Bruner run in the early 70s is incredible mysticism, strange things going on, cool looking, and is also outstanding, among other good runs.
Okay. John?
Well, as you can tell from behind me, who I think of, I've always liked Zatanna. I was disappointed when the Batman the Animated Series introduced her and did not get in Magic at. I think she's got a good origin that she's taken over her father's business. There's this whole she's a stage magician who can do real magic, but in most of her act, it's just stage magic. Her introduction to the DC universe is said to be DC's really first miniseries, in that she made multiple appearances in different comics. And her origin, she's one of the few that really hasn't changed much. There was one period in, I think it was late 70s, early 80s, in which they changed her outfit and her way of doing magic. But for the most part, it's always talking backwards is the way she generates her magic. And DC remarkably has been very consistent with that. So yeah, Zatanna, you say magic in the comics, first one I think of is.
Well, the first one I think of is Mordru the Merciless in an old issue of Adventure Comics where he escaped from his prison and the Legion of Superheroes very nearly didn't survive the experience. So that's what I think of. And I tend to think of magic users in general, like Zatanna, like Doctor Strange. We can talk about whether Dr. Fate is a magic user or something else altogether. What was the first comic story or related story involving magic that you remember reading? I mean, for me, it was Mordred, but I'd like to know what everybody else thinks. Robyn, what about you?
The first one that I don't know if it's the first one that I read, but it is one of my favorites. And so it's the one that is the earliest one that comes to mind for me. It is it's both a historical fiction and it's in a genre that's called Weird West. And it's my first exposure to what Weird West was, or what Weird West is. But it's set in the American West shortly after the Civil War, and there are monsters and there's magic. And I just remember thinking to myself, like, what is this? And yeah, so it's one of the reasons why that one sticks out in my mind. And it holds up really well. I feel like sometimes you're kind of like what you shared with your story with Jimmy Olsen. Sometimes your first is memorable, but it might not really be that good. You find other better materials once you broaden your horizons and read a little bit more. But I've read more, and this one still is one of my faves.
It's very good.
Well, Fraser, what is the first one you remember reading?
I'm trying to think back. It might have been, there were so many second string magicians floating around in comics. My guess is might have been it would have been like the third installment of Zatanna's adventure. She teams up with Green Lantern. They go to an alternate universe, which is steady state. Nothing changes, nothing ages. And at the time, she was trying to find out what had happened to her father. The warlock of the other world of Ys is one of his old enemies. She thinks she can find him. She needs Green Lantern's help. And it was all kinds of weird stuff happens because the physical laws are different, just a little in Ys. And it looks like the warlock is going to win. And of course, GL and Zatanna, by gambling that they know what each other has in mind, manage to successfully take him down. But, Gil Kane, Art, Zatanna, who is a very cool character, Green Lantern, it worked.
John, what about you?
Okay, first magic character in comics. Wendy, the Good Little Witch. She was a friend of Casper, and I think there was a little devil involved as well. But that is the first magical character I remember reading about in the comics. I don't remember when I first discovered Zatanna and all the rest of the magic users of the DC universe. Technically, I guess you could say the Earth 2 Green Lantern, since his ring was magic based. And then there's, well, we can get into the Spectre discussion later.
Yeah. Jenny, how about you?
I kind of have two. I was only allowed, the comics I was allowed growing up were anything Disney, and anything Archie. So my first is really Sabrina the Teenage Witch. And I love Sabrina. I have not enjoyed any of her TV versions because I don't see Sabrina is this, to me, this almost angelic character. And I never want to see her nasty. That's just not the Sabrina I grew up with, is the Sabrina I like. But I also have a memory. I cannot tell you which issue it is. I cannot tell you what year I read it, though my guess is the 70s. There was an issue that had Thor and Loki in it, and Loki was doing all sorts of stuff. And anytime it's like, what was your first, even though Sabrina and probably Wendy as well were really my first, honestly, I just think of this scene where Loki's doing magic stuff and Thor's like, right. I cannot, like I said, I can't remember when, where, or how, but the image of Loki being gleefully evil with his magic, which nobody really has a defense against, is still kind of striking me there.
Well, you're raising the point that nobody had an effective defense against Loki. Raises something else that I wanted to talk about, which is if you have a magic user facing people who don't possess any magical ability, how do you avoid the Superman problem of they have no defense against this? They have no way to counter it. If you can think of a story that effectively did that and how it did it, that would be great, or just general discussion. Fraser, will you start?
Yes, okay, I'll pick. In the comic book universe, it doesn't matter so much because there are so many other kinds of powers. Green Lantern went up a couple of times against Merwithan, who is a powerful wizard who had wound Abin Greek Howl's predecessor, had trapped him inside the power ring as the one place he could seal him and cut him off from magic. He had found a way to get magic anyway. He is powerful enough to cancel the power ring, but, you know, it's a power ring. There are ways around that. And if you're Spider-Man, because Spider-Man has been going up against magic since he was a teen, he is fast. He can web people's mouths shut. If you have to aim your spells, he can probably dodge. So in the comic book universe, even if you don't have magic, unless you are at the Loki or Dormammu level, it is usually manageable.
John?
Hey, well, I had in one of my own books, I had one magician basically, it took all the powers away from my hero, who it isn't expected, and just shot the guy. Because magic users do not think of mechanical ways of taking them out. Now, granted, Superman, Batman, or whatever, they wouldn't think of well, they would think of it, they just wouldn't do it. But I've seen a number of different ways. I've seen Superman basically treating magic users as if they were kryptonite, and basically his defenses against whatever defenses he uses against kryptonite, he uses against magic users. Speaking of Superman and magic, they just finished up a great story arc in the current Superman, in which Bizarro becomes a master of magic, because if magic harms Superman, it enhances Bizarro. And it was a really good story arc with a really surprise helper, a helper to Superman. And it was kind of sad at the end, but I mean, if you like the to see how Superman deals with this kind of magic. It's the current. They just finished it up. Generally, like Fraser said, they all, the writer always finds a way to get around magic. Batman can stand out back far. Batman hands Superman a batarang. Superman throws that, and end of story or whatever.
Okay, Jenny.
Knock them down. I mean, that's what I was going to say. I've seen Batman use a batarang. I've seen people use water. I mean, you can be doing all the stuff, but if someone throws a baseball at your head and hits you, you're probably done for at least that round. So the magic users, other than Loki, who can also be stopped, okay? Again, you cover his mouth and tie his hands, right? If he can't do anything. I think that's one of the weaknesses that they give the magic users, is they have to be making hand gestures or they have to be talking. It's not mental telepathy. It's not the same thing as, say, Professor X, who you have to knock out to block him, or you have to have a blocking helmet like Magneto has. So it's not that hard. Sneak up behind them and trip them, knock them over. That, I think, realistically, they're reasonably easy to disrupt, because again, they have to concentrate to do their spells and make their magic work. So I feel like they've got an inherent, I tripped over my own feet, protection for the rest of us in there. Even Loki can, lose his balance and go down.
In the first movie, Thor put his hammer on Loki, and Loki was based.
Right? Yeah, he can't move. Right? Yeah, I'm stuck. Right.
The best defeat of Loki, there was in Walt Simonson's run, they had a scene where Loki has made Thor the love slave of his henchwoman, who has briefly been knocked out so she can't give Thor any orders. So Thor throws his hammer out the window, grabs Loki by the throat and holds it up. You know how my hammer always returns to my hand when I throw it? Look what's in the way now. Are you going to take the spell off? And after a very quick bit of bluster, Loki takes the spell off. And Thor just drops him and catches Mjolnir.
Andy.
I really did like the Hulk, bam, 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 puny god.
Right, that was great. I
Look,
remember laughing out loud when I saw that.
Yeah.
Let me get Robyn's answer before we get too far off track. So what do you think about stopping magic users?
Well, before that, Jenny, you made me think of like when we played Pathfinder, all the fighters are surrounding the magic users for that very reason. A well-placed arrow will take them out. But I thought of this one comic series that I really enjoyed called Basilisk. So it is a group of people who share magical abilities. And when one dies, another one inherits their abilities. And they were pretty much unstoppable. They were godlike. They had groups of people who worshipped them. The only way that they were able to be stopped, one of their own had to stop them. So that's kind of what I think of. And generally that's what happens a lot. Similar to what you guys said too, if there's some other type of fallibility of the body, you know what I mean, that can take out a magic user. I have seen that a lot, but in this particular case, because one of the guys was really strong, aside from having this magical ability, he was just really physically strong as well. So he could actually defend himself on a physical level as well. They had another character who was very proficient with arms. So they had those abilities on top of their magical abilities. So one of their own had to take them down.
Okay. Well, we're kind of getting into moments that we enjoyed involving magic with the stopping magic users discussion. And so why don't we talk about stories or moments that we enjoyed that involve magic in some way? John, will you start?
Okay, magic in some way.
It can be anything.
Yeah, I got to think.
I've got one.
Okay.
I've
Jenny?
got one. You're embarrassing me in front of the wizards. The whole thing where Hulk cannot, Banner can't bring Hulk out, and Stark's just standing there nicknaming the wizard. I love that because it's, you have the magic guys, and you have people who are extremely powerful, and yet, hey, why aren't you, making us look good? Our side looks crappy. Which I think happens a lot. I think one of the things on the magic users that I like, but it's kind of tropey, is when they first come on, you're all like, oh, gasp, gasp, gasp. And then the rest of the time they're there, people are literally finding ways to overcome everything they do, both on their side and those against them. So, like I said, I mean, with Loki, everyone's trying to figure out how to stop him and how to fool him, and not be fooled by him. But I really like you're embarrassing me in front of the wizards.
Okay. Robyn, do you have one?
I generally like I like comedy and I like horror, and I'm like, oh my gosh, Nancy's gonna make me pick one. So if I had to pick one, I'm gonna say this one, Curse Words by Charles Soule. I think I may have potentially mentioned it also in another panel that we did. That's kind of blurry. But so the premise of this one, and this story to me is hilarious. So the magic user's name, his name is Wizard. And his evil magical overlord, they live in a parallel dimension. His evil magical overlord sends him to our dimension to conquer in his name before he comes over. And he gets here, and all the humans are like enthralled. They're like, wow, he can do magic. And he's like, man, I love it here. I'm not destroying you guys. I love it. And so then like he ends up not understanding, how his magic is very powerful and can do damaging things to our bodies. And he's like, sorry, little dude, I didn't mean to turn you into a chair over there, So, and it's just all of these hijinks around him trying to understand that like his magic's kind of detrimental to us, and figuring out like that balance of, living amongst us while still having his magic. So it's really fun.
Okay. Fraser?
I'll pick two just to cheat. The first, after Doctor Strange first defeats, or he helps Dormammu save the Dark Dimension from an invasion, Dormammu agrees never to invade Earth while Doctor Strange lives. We can all see the loophole in that. So using Mordo as his agent, he is out to kill Doctor Strange, and there is like a 2-year plotline which Strange is running, trying to find a way to beat the amped up Mordo and Dormammu, and it is terrifically well done. The second, also from the Silver Age, Mordru, his first appearance. Mordru is not stoppable. He is magic on the Galactus level. He can take out entire planets and break them to his will without working up a sweat. The Legion managed to trick him into getting stuck in an airless vault, so he's been in a coma for like 20 years. Now he woke up. It is a problem. And it is really hard to write a story with an omnipotent villain on that level. I've seen lots of good writers do it and fail miserably. And Jim Shooter, who was the writer at the time, makes it work. So it is a very solid two-parter. Mordru has rarely been done that well again, precisely because it's so hard.
Okay. And John, did you come up with one?
Okay. Here's a magician we haven't mentioned yet. Good old John Constantine. The bad boy of magic, and anything else, if you must say. Forget the story. I was reading Hellblazer for a while, and in it, Constantine is facing a demon, and it seems like he's basically given up. He's okay. You got me. You're taking me to hell. Tell you what. One last drink. And whatever he served him was made out of holy water. And, well, Constantine didn't go to hell, but the demon was not really comfortable. Hawkman did the same thing. He was Hawkman it was established that Hawkman has lived many, many, many lives, and he's facing vampires. And notices that it is raining a bit, And in one of his lives, he was a bishop, working on the principle of thou art a priest forever, according to the order of Melchizedek. He blesses the rain and washes the vampire away.
Well, I was going to mention Mordru, but Fraser stole my thunder. The Legion flees from Mordru back to 20th century Smallville. So there's a lot of interaction with Pete Ross and Lana Lang too, which is one of the things that I liked a lot about that story. And the other one that I had in mind has just gone, it's kind of gone poof. Oh, I know what it was. There was a comic book from Boom Studios called Once and Future. And it was the Arthurian legends come to life with overtones of horror, which Robyn might enjoy. And they didn't look like themselves. They were kind of ghastly and skeletal and yucky. But the magic was kind of all around them. The protagonists were not themselves magic users. It's a grandmother and her grandson who has no clue what is going on. And they're like caught up in the story, and they have to defeat this second coming of Arthur, who is actually, in fact, evil. And I love the Arthurian legends. It was a great twist on it, and it was written by Kieran Gillen and drawn by Dan Mora. It was a gorgeous book. And for those of you who like to read things that are complete, it is complete. So you can go and find it. It has been collected, and it was really, really good. So I think sometimes people watch these panels not just for the discussion to see whether they agree with it or makes them think about something, but also because they're looking for something to read. So what else would you recommend? John, do you want to start?
I don't know if you could call it magic or what, but there is a indie comic, and it's called Bunny Mask. And it is supernatural. It is magic. It is creepy as hell. I got a copy of pre-comic book day issue, and just from that, I had to get. Basically, right now, I have the 2 graphic novels, that I've read twice. But I would, if you like magic and creepy, I would go with Bunny Mask. If you like magic and police procedurals, I would go with the River of London series. Both, I mean, there are graphic novels that are in continuity to the novel series, but you can enjoy the graphic novels, as standalones, and there's 4 issues at a time, and there's always one either almost in the works, or it's finished up and is heading for trade paperback. So I would recommend either of those.
Okay. Jenny?
I have nothing to recommend.
Do you want me to come back to you?
No, I actually want to talk about things that I didn't think went well. So let's go around with everybody else's recommendations, and then I actually really do want to talk about.
Okay, well, that actually is on my list. Things that were not done effectively.
Yeah.
So we'll definitely get to that. Robyn, what would you like to recommend?
So I'll recommend one that John might like, because you mentioned liking police procedurals. So this one, Abbott, it's set in the 70s. It follows a woman in Detroit. She's actually a journalist, but she has close ties with kind of following the police during their investigations, and she ends up kind of uncovering an occult plot. So it really feels like a detective story as well. It feels like a police procedural because she is doing the investigating. So yeah, that one, Abbott.
Okay. Fraser?
I did come up with one, by the way.
You did? Okay. We'll go.
Yeah.
I'll get Fraser and then I'll come back to you.
Okay, I'll go with a Vertigo series I don't think is well known enough, Unwritten. It's Wilson Taylor is the beloved author of the Tommy Taylor series about a boy wizard studying at a school. Why, yes, that is the template. And his son, unfortunately, is also named Tommy Taylor. He has spent his entire life dealing with the jokes and the fans who want to bang Tommy Taylor, and the crazies who think he is not some ordinary boy. He is Tommy Taylor from the stories, magically made flesh. Only it turns out that last part is not entirely wrong. There is a magic in fiction, and people have been manipulating it and controlling it for centuries. And as it turns out, someone has been manipulating and controlling them. And Tommy Taylor is his father's weapon for breaking the cabal. It is very strange and imaginative by Michael Carey, is the scripter, and I highly recommend it. It was complete several years ago.
Okay. Jenny, what did you have?
Okay. I am embarrassed to say I cannot remember the author, who I have met personally and paneled with at San Diego Comic-Con, so I'm super embarrassed. But Sailor Twain, Twain, is an absolutely brilliant graphic novel that was in hardback when I got it. And it's got creepy, it's got fabulous artwork, and it's got a very compelling story. So if you can find it, because it came out a few years ago, Sailor, Sailor, Twain, like Mark Twain, but
Okay.
not like Mark Twain.
Okay.
It was excellent. Just one of the best graphic novels and books I'd read that year.
Well, I'd like to add Excalibur. Teenie Howard did a run on Excalibur, blending superheroes, magic, and Arthurian legends, and it was just brilliantly done. I'm blanking on the name of the artist, but the art was beautiful. Rogue and Gambit were in it. Jubilee was in it. There was a dragon, and Betsy Braddock was Captain Britain with her psi powers, and it's a terrific book. Lots of action adventure, but like Once and Future, it's an interesting but altogether different twist on the Arthurian legends. They're not at all alike. So they're really good. So let's go to what did you not think worked particularly well? And Jenny, since you particularly wanted to address this, let's start with you.
The TV version of The Cape. What a disaster. Could have been great. Could have been good. We watched every episode with me basically rewriting it aloud, going, well, if they'd done X, Y, Z, this would already be more compelling. And my husband having to admit that I was correct each and every time. The Cape is a cool comic, but the TV series was atrociously bad. It pretty much, I felt like any decision they made, they were like, hey, there's a good way, there's a mediocre way, and there's a terrible way. They picked terrible 9 times out of 10, and the 10th time they picked mediocre. They never picked good. And it was really disappointing because it was also in the time before the MCU was really launching. So we didn't have anything like it on television, and it could have been just fabulous, and it was awful. So I'm still bitter about how they messed that up.
Okay. Robyn?
I'm trying to think. I might have to abstain on this one. I can't think of any that I read all the way through that are done poorly. I'm gonna have to keep thinking about that one.
Okay, well, I'll come back to you. Fraser?
I'm sick and tired of the stories, and I've seen quite a few of them over the years, which try to ground things in reality and history by explaining this cult or this village or this sorcerer is descended from the witches of Salem. There were no witches at Salem. There were a bunch of innocent people who were hung for witchcraft, which none of them practiced. It pisses me off that we are retroactively implying that, yeah, maybe there were some witches there. Maybe the witch finders were right. No, they were wrong. They're always wrong. Shut the bleep up.
Okay. John, what about you?
Oh, Fraser, don't you realize that the real witches of Salem hid themselves and cast the blame on these innocent people? But anyway,
a real witch would never do that.
Which witch is that?
A real witch would never do that.
Okay,
sorry, Terry Pratchett girl. A real witch would never do that.
But the thing, all right, Ginny mentioned how a TV show went wrong. I liked the first season of Sabrina. It was good. had a wonderful ending. But when they start, and it all started going wrong with the holiday special, because it definitely wasn't a Christmas special. And then I got maybe 1 or 2 episodes into season 2, and it sort of reversed, at least to my mind, everything that happened in the ending of season 1. And I'm thinking, no, I can't do this anymore. But I've mentioned there was an episode, there was a mini series with Zatanna. I forget what it was called, but it was, she got a new costume, she got a new way of invoking magic, and it basically, whatever that woman was at the end of the show definitely wasn't Zatanna, and it was quickly forgotten and dropped into its own little pocket dimension of the DC multiverse, because nobody wants to go there. But what really bothers me is when the rules of magic are not precisely down. That it seems that the magician can do anything that the plot requires. Oh yeah, I can cast a tarot and make my magic from there, but I don't have cards, so I'm going to have a water spell. Oh, there's no water. Let me talk backwards like Zatanna. It's just that it's sort of like the TV show Monk. Whatever his, he had OCD and a bunch of other problems, but whatever the plot required, that was his problem for the week. Oh, I'm afraid of this. So of course, I'm afraid of elephants. So of course, we're going to the circus. Oh, I'm afraid of the dark. So of course, there's a black cat. That sort of thing. It's when the rule you in order to do magic, you need magic requires a certain rules in order for it to be believable. And it's when somebody decides, well, there are no rules in magic. No. That bothers me the most.
Okay. Robyn, did you come up with something?
You're
muted.
Sorry about that. I think I came up with one, and it's kind of a cheat because it's not really one that I didn't like. So the title is Middle West by Scotty Young, and I was trying to find a image of it so that I could show you guys. I absolutely loved the story overall. In the first probably 80% of it, I love Jorge Corona's art, especially the way that magic is depicted. The story kind of deals with grief, trauma, family dynamics and relationships, and his magic manifests through his trauma and through his anger and depression, and how he tries to reconcile with that. And a big chunk of the story deals with like found family and things like that. And just the way that Jorge Corona represents characters in general, but also the way that magic is represented in this story, and the manifestation of it is beautiful. But the last like 20% of the book felt very disconnected from the first part of the story. And it didn't feel like I got a true conclusion to what he was trying to kind of convey with using magic to represent those things about a person's kind of emotional journey. So it was, I can't say that I hated it, but it was kind of a disappointment because it felt like it didn't completely connect.
Okay. Well, I would pick season 4 of the Netflix the Max Titan series. There was a lot to like about that series. There was also a lot that was problematic. And at the end of season 1, Raven, who is the daughter of the other dimensional demon Trigon, vanquished Trigon. I mean, he vanished in a puff of not especially good special effects smoke, and she ended up with the famous ruby on her forehead. So for the last season, they were going to do Brother Blood and Mother Mayhem, who are two really popular villains in the Titans canon because they were so powerful when Wolfman and Perez introduced them, and they were so dangerous, and the Titans really had to work to defeat them. Well, that was fine, except they decided to bring back Trigon with the magic of Mother Mayhem's pool. And I'm sitting there thinking, that's not how this worked. And we did away with Trigon at the end of season 1. So why is Trigon back, and how is he still there? And I don't understand. And I watched every single episode of that series. So I thought, if you're going to use magic, use it to explain this. Use it to pull this together, because it wasn't, in my opinion, pulled together. There are two other things that we wanted to talk about. Robyn wanted to talk about horror and monsters. And I think John and several others of us want to talk about are the Spectre and Dr. And the Phantom Stranger and characters like that, magical or something else. So let's start with the horror, and then we'll go to the others. So Robyn, what exactly is it that you want to talk about this?
So what are your guys' thoughts on like the inclusion of, I know that there's a lot of overlap, but does being a monster automatically put you as like a magic user? So like, for instance, with like vampires, they have the ability to like hypnotize people. So would you look at that as kind of an extension of a biological like evolution that they have? So in that kind of sense, you could say it's like a science, because it's part of like their biology. They have the ability to do that, similar to like a pitcher plant can kind of like bring flies into it, even though they're dangerous. Or is that hypnotic ability a form of magic? Because we do know that magic can be used to hypnotize, but even though the power is the same, is one magic and one biology, or are they both magic?
Okay. Fraser, what do you think?
I would say, well, to use vampires as an example, yes, they are. I mean, you can certainly write them as scientific if you want. A lot of people have. In Marvel and DC, they are Morbius is a science-based vampire who doesn't believe in supernatural vampires. But Dracula is real. He is supernatural. I don't think of him as a magician in any sense, but the powers that he possesses stems from the state of being a vampire. Just like a ghost can pass through walls, it is a magical ability perhaps, but it does not make them magicians. That would be the simple answer.
Okay, John?
I think it depends on how you define your monsters. I've always seen, Frankenstein's creature is a monster, but only because he is in the Latin version of monstrous, something horrible. You know, he is not a magical creature at all. He's a creature of science. Werewolves, you know, if you get bitten by a werewolf, you become a werewolf. Same thing with zombies. So that seems to be some kind of viral transfer. As far as vampires are concerned, the only thing magical I can see about them is that they can change into a bat without regard to the conservation of mass. Generally, I see monsters. There's magic, there's the supernatural, and then there are the monsters. And that's, in my mind, unless we have Dracula talking backwards and turning somebody into a bunny, I don't think it's
Okay. Gini?
I think it depends on how the author writes them. Swamp Thing has been both a monster and a magician. So Swamp Thing uses magic all the time now, these days. Okay. It used to be scary, and now he's like the king of Earth or something. So I really think it's in the decision the creator of whatever it is. I kind of agree that if you can make a scientific argument, it's science fiction, not magic. But at the same time, you could easily write a vampire that is doing magic as well. I'm sure it's been done somewhere in the back of my mind. My hindbrain is screaming, "You've seen something like that," but I don't remember fully. But I just really think that the real answer is it depends, and it depends on the intention of the creator or creators of the work, on how they want you to feel about the particular creatures. Frankenstein's monster is a really great example. We know it's created by science. So it can't, so I'm with John there. If it can do a spell too, right, then it's a magician. But I think there are plenty of monsters out there, again, like Swamp Thing, that depending on who writes it, Swamp Thing can do magic, right? And then Swamp Thing can't do magic, but he could do magic last week. Well, this week somebody else is different, and they're writing it differently.
What do you think, Robyn?
I liked hearing what you guys said. I liked what John said about the vampires turning into bats. I feel like, kind of to your point, Ginny, that a being is different from their abilities. So if they have the ability to use magic, then that's magic. But then I do sometimes feel like there are some beings kind of like Fae that are considered as magical beings. They exist because like they have magic in their blood system and things like that. So I think sometimes the lines can be blurred a little bit. Sometimes it's stark in one thing. I do also like the example of like Frankenstein's monster. That's, very specifically science fiction. And to kind of Jenny's point, depending on if you were to say like, okay, you take this potion and you become a zombie, then that's magic. But if you have a viral infection and you become a zombie, then that's science fiction. So you have two zombies, but the way that the creator chose to go about their origin in a way defines whether or not they are magical beings versus just kind of products of some type of scientific discovery or scientific action.
Okay, well,
thank you, Robyn. I'm picturing a zombie created with a potion.
Well, I mean, that's what necromancers do, right?
And a zombie who was created through a viral infection. What happens if they bite each other?
Super zombie babies.
Yes,
that could be a panel.
Yeah.
That could be a panel on its own. We're actually almost at time. So this will be our last question around. And that is, do you think characters like the Spectre, who I think we would all agree is kind of in class by himself, but the Phantom Stranger, Dr. Fate, are they magic users or are they something else? John, you wanted to talk about this, so would you start?
Yeah. I would think, my thinking is, if they are agents of a higher being, the Spectre is the vengeance of God. Dr. Fate is a Lord of Order, or at least obeys the Lord of Order. Moon Knight, what god is Khonshu or something like that? Moonlight is an agent of a higher power. Once you get into that, I think we're dealing with the supernatural and not necessarily magic. Zatanna is her own person. John Constantine is not an agent of anybody. Harry Potter and the crowd at Hogwarts, they are not beholden to a higher power. But so if you're an independent agent for good or for evil, then I think it's magic. If you are a disciple or you are an agent of a higher power, then yes, it's supernatural. That would be my distinction.
All right. Ginny, do you have anything to add?
No, what John said, pretty accurate.
Okay, Robyn?
I'm not familiar with I know of them, but I haven't read any of the stories for Dr. Fate or Spectre, so I can't really effectively answer that question, unfortunately.
Okay, and Fraser?
I would say Phantom Stranger, whatever he is, and I ignore all origins because he's better without one. Definitely a mage of some sort, though he may be something else as well. Dr. Fate, I think, falls on the border. He is possessed by a Lord of Order, but he did train Kent Nelson in magic all these years. So obviously, I think he is a mage at the same time, and it's kind of fuzzy. But yes, I would say generally John pretty much had it right, even though I
Okay.
disagree on particulars.
Okay, well then, actually it's time for us to wrap up. So let's go around and please tell people where they can find information about you or your work. And if you have a new, recent, or upcoming release that you would like to highlight, this would be the time. And Fraser, we'll start with you.
I'm Fraser Sherman. You can find me online at frasersherman.com. That's Fraser. All my books are listed there, including there's a page for my publishing imprint, Behold the Book. They're also available on Amazon and most other sites. I will have some stuff coming out later this year, but it's still months away.
Okay, Robyn?
Our website for Diversity Issues podcast is diversityissues.libsyn.com, Libsyn.
Okay, and Gini?
GiniKoch.com. I'm all over Facebook. If you want to sign up for my free newsletter, hook me up. You can do so from my Facebook fan page, Hairspray and Rock and Roll. I'm also on X, Twitter, Blue Sky, and Pinterest. And my most recent release just came out a couple, like 2 weeks prior to when we're recording. Falls Girl by me and my co-writer, B.B. Bayless, released from Ginger Blue Publishing. And go grab a copy. It's our first great mystery.
Okay, John?
Hey, John, you can find me on Facebook, John French or John L. French. My books are available on Amazon, Barnes & Noble, and from the publishers who put them out. And instead of a new release, I'd like to go back a couple years and mention my book of magic called The Magic of Simon Toons. Simon is a gentleman adventurer in the old style who has a taste for magic and in the middle of the book accidentally summons a blonde demon assistant.
Okay. My website is nancynorthcott.com. At Nancy Northcott on X Twitter. And that's probably the most effective way to interact with me on social media. I have a Facebook page, but I'm not there very much. My next release is The Speaker for All, a novel in the Outcast Station science fiction series that Jeannie Adams and I create together. I'd like to thank everyone on the panel for participating in this discussion. Thank you to everyone who's watching it. And thank you to our sponsors, Heroes Aren't Hard to Find and Heroes Convention. For more information about them, you can visit heroesonline.com. And remember, there's always more comics discussion coming on ConTinual, the convention that never sleeps.